Hello, 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 everyone. Well, happy Wednesday. We are jumping on for this Visionaries in Transition Facebook Live series. If we haven't met already, I'm Clara Jones. I'm an author, speaker, and mentor committed to creating a better world for everyone through inclusive stories and practices. And if you're joining us, please like, comment, and share. We'd love to know that you're here. And so today we're talking about the transitions that have shaped our lives and businesses with Deb Montgomery. So I'm so glad to have you here today. I was trying to remember where we met, but I know it was a connection of a connection of a connection.
Georgiana.
Right.
Yes.
And she's the Facebook queen.
Oh my gosh. Yes, she is. I love her.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that the connection allowed us to connect. That has been a really, really nice treat. So thank you for having me on.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's the power of networking, right? Like you never know who it's snowball effect. So, all right, well, let's dive into it. Tell us how you got to where you are today.
This is such a hard question because we've lived like longish lives. But I would say for me, it started in third grade. I wrote an essay saying what I wanted to be when I grew up, and that was a pediatrician. And I knew, sometimes people don't know for a long time. Sometimes people don't figure it out like ever, but I knew I wanted to be a pediatrician, and everything I did went in that direction from third grade on. I took all the courses, and then by high school I was taking all the AP science courses and the math courses, and I think I had an analytic geometry my senior year in high school, and I would do there were two major universities. I'm from Chicago, and I went into their early programs and their summer programs. But I also I was involved in drama from the time I was 5, and I really loved that. And I played violin from a very young age too. So I love those two things, but you don't grow up and do those things. You do something practical. And once you say doctor, like everyone is like dialed into that. We're going to have a doctor. We're going to have a doctor. Yeah. And I came from a family of educators. So it was reinforced. And I went all the way through. I was pre-med, I finished my junior year. But during that time, I took a communication course, and I loved the professor and I loved the course. And I didn't know exactly what it was going to look like, but that's what I wanted to do with my life. And it turned everyone else's world upside down. And no one really wanted me to change that. But I did do it. I transferred schools. I got my bachelor's in communication, went on to get my master's in communication, came out, and I'm a bit of, I'm a little bohemian. I'm like a classic bohemian. I don't know. And I'm not a 9-to-5 person. I knew that. Yet it was also a time when everybody else was a 9-to-5 person. They were 9-to-5 people, and I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I didn't want to do it sitting behind a desk for from 9 to 5 every day. Yeah. So I went freelance, which freaked my parents out again, because like, how are you going to survive? You need to make money, and it wasn't secure. There's not the gold watch at the end and the nice retirement, but I did it anyway, and I really have not looked back. Loved it, loved what I did. I became a video producer, writer. I was an actress, so I did corporate videos and corporate spokesperson type things. And I did that, and I loved it. And then I got married, and my daughter came along, and it's time for another transition because I looked at her and said, I want to stay home, at least until it's time for school. So I stayed home. And when it was time for school, I put her in a Montessori program. She wasn't doing anything there. She would play there, and then she'd come home, and then she wanted me to teach her. And I said, why are you not working there? And then you're coming home and working me. And she said, I don't want them to teach me. I want you to teach me. I want to play there. To which I then pulled her out because that's a very expensive play date. So she came home, didn't know what that was going to look like. didn't know anyone who had ever homeschooled, and I ended up homeschooling. So, you know, my path is not straight. Like I've been all over the place, and so I was home with her, but I still had that need to create. So I homeschooled her. I also co-founded a co-op for homeschoolers, and I ended up being the director, and I was teaching, which I was talking to Nia, my daughter, about this conversation that we were going to have, and she said, "Don't forget to tell them how much you knew what you did. You knew what you didn't want to do, and that was teach." And that was true. I never wanted to teach, and I fell in love with it because I said yes. And I did that for a while, and as my daughter was getting older, she got to be about 15, I knew I was not going to be a lifer. And so I needed to plan what I was going to do. And I started to look at myself and my life, and who am I now? What do I want to do? And I had no idea. And that was crushing. That was really crushing. So in the midst of me trying to figure out what I'm going to do, because she's now 15 and I'm going to have to release her to the world, my mom came for a visit, and she never went home. She ended up moving in with me, and later I became, her caregiver. And so during this time, as my mom is trying to reconcile the later years of her life, I'm trying to figure out what this new season is going to be for me. And so all of that played into what I was doing. But I got a coach, which was the wisest thing that I could have done. And I thought I was going for help me make this business, really work. And it ended up being, help me figure out who the heck I am.
Per usual.
Never expected that. Never expected that. And she was amazing, and she's a friend now. And I eventually grew to the place where I could do the business stuff, but it was a lot of figuring out who I was. You never think, at least I didn't think I would need this redefinition, for different times of life. And yet that absolutely happened. And I knew at this point, I didn't want to do my business like I had always done it. So now I had to figure out what that looked like, and in a changing technological world. And I came up with realizing that the common thread through my life had always been story. And in fact, I taught literature and novel writing when I was teaching as well, and speech. And I kind of came home to story, which was probably when I was 5. I went to a play and I said, I want to do that. And that was about telling a story. So I ended up telling stories with videos. I tell stories with writing. It became storytelling. And so I created my own career, creative media and story coach. And I loved it. As my mom became more dependent on my help, it became more difficult. And when she transitioned, I was kind of lost again. So other people's transitions affect your transitions. And my daughter said, after some months, she said, why don't we do a podcast? What will we do? And she'd say, what are we going to talk about? And she said, I don't know. We'll just do. And I think she was thinking we're kind of silly introverts, and so we have a lot of fun. And she thought we'd do that. And I felt like, I don't know what that'll do to my brand. So we came up with something, mother-daughter, and it grew into something that really became more about helping people, connecting people with people and information that would allow them to thrive in their lives. And it's become, my latest great love. So that's it. So I'm a creative media and story coach, and I help people with media and tell their stories using media effectively and powerfully. And with my daughter, I get to talk to some pretty amazing people and grow and expand while I'm helping other people access information they might not otherwise have gotten. So it's been a great life.
Yeah, I mean, I love the place that you started with the story, is like having this myopic focus on one career. I was always very envious of people who had that when I was growing up, like going through elementary school, high school, even college. Mm-hmm. I had people around me who were like, I'm going to work in the theater and that's where I'm going to be. I'm going to work in medicine and that's where I'm going to be. I'm going to work in environmental science and that's where I'm going to be. And I never had that myopic focus. I have so many different interests and so many different paths available to me that I always kind of almost shamed myself for not having that myopic focus. But over the years, I've realized that there's pros and cons to both approaches. Mm-hmm. Because now I'm seeing, as I'm getting well into my 30s and stuff like that, I'm seeing people around me go through similar things that you've gone through, is this redefinition period that they're now being faced with. Mm-hmm. It's like they devoted so many years to this one singular purpose. And then they're finally coming up for air and being like, well, did that actually fulfill me? You know, and they're kind of having an identity crisis around it. Right. Whereas I've been going through identity crises every year for as long as I can remember.
So you're good at it.
I'm so good at identity crises. But there's pros and cons to both approaches, because I don't have a resume that's like, I spent X amount of years in medicine. I spent X amount of years in education. I spent X amount of years in retail or whatever it is. And I think it's very fascinating how we all approach this concept of career. Mm-hmm. Like, it's such a big topic and we all approach it in different ways. But those are the two main approaches that I see, is like this kind of blinders approach of being like, I'm only doing medicine, I'm only doing education, I'm only doing this, or trying all the things and getting all the experiences, but it's a little chaotic that way.
It can be, but I think people do more moving into different streams than they even realize. Because you could even say within I've kind of done the same thing, all the way through, but in very different ways. And I think the difference is, if you decide to sit in one spot, and maybe that brings you a lot of joy and that's great, then you're doing that. But usually there's a little bit of a shift. You did that thing like this for a while, and then if you were, I don't want to even judge it, but like, if you decided that you were willing to make another shift, now you're doing it like this. And each time you switch it up, I think you expand, which is like I don't know what I'd do if I wasn't constantly growing. Like every day I go, okay, so what did I learn yesterday? Or what can I do today that's going to have an impact on how I approach tomorrow? So,
and I definitely think there's a lot of benefit to finding those through threads, those threads that follow you throughout your life. Like, we were even talking about this before we started the Facebook Live. It's like, my writing career, I'm really coming 360, because words and writing and stories, as you also can relate to, is a through line that's been in my life, especially in a creative aspect. Like, I was born to be a creative, especially in the realm of words. And that's something that wasn't necessarily encouraged, though. Like you say about your violin, it's not something that people see as a career.
Right.
It's not the capital CAREER that we're all kind of brainwashed, influenced, pressured to pursue. And it's interesting when we find ourselves later in life returning to those same things that weren't necessarily encouraged earlier on.
I still play, we're in orchestras and we'll perform around, like it's so much a part of me. And I think it's nice when you do things when you're younger that you can bring into your life as in every stage, in every season, sometimes in different ways, but so it's an incredible life. The opportunities that we have to experience the world in different ways. even and especially I think through our work, because like you said, we're always creating,
Yeah.
Not just if we're artistic or playing an
Yes.
instrument,
100%.
we're all creators, we're all creations. So, however you're putting your mark out there, I just, as long as you boldly and vibrantly do it and maybe a little courageously, it's like sometimes it's not that easy. But I think for me, one of the things that changed my life every time it changed was my yes. My yes.
I mean, that brings to mind one of my favorite phrases. It's like anything worth doing is worth half-assing.
That's so true.
Because if it's worth doing, it's worth doing it badly. Like, instead of not doing anything about it. Like 10% is still going to be better than 0%. So if you can commit 10% to it, it's worth that effort, even if it is just 10%. But I'm wondering, out of all of these transitions, what were like the major ones that had the biggest impact?
I would say homeschooling. Well, I would say first, making that decision to change careers, that was huge.
Yeah.
I didn't feel huge at the time, but looking back, I'm like, wow, you were pretty brave there, kid. That homeschooling, caregiving was a huge one for me. And my mom's transition. And I didn't mention that in the middle of last year, my husband made his transition too, and we ended up having to caregive again. So it's been a 7-year cycle that is, I believe, completed last year for me, that brought back a lot of growth and had a lot of transitions.
I mean, the sandwich generation always has all of these generations or these transitions built into it, because you're dealing with both the transitions of the younger generation as well as the transitions of the older generation that sandwich you. And that, I think, is one of the most fertile places for personal development. Like you were mentioning in your coaching programs, how like you never expected that you would have to focus on personal stuff, like business. There's supposed to be this wall between personal and business,
right?
But it's imaginary.
It's very imaginary. Like one affects the other and the other affects the other.
Yeah. Yeah. And I always say that like personal development is business development at the end of the day, because like becoming a business owner, becoming an entrepreneur is the fastest way to put your flaws and your shadows on a pedestal, because you're confronted with them every single day. Like your imperfections are there. Like you can't turn a blind eye to them in any shape or form. And I think it's interesting that like this idea of sandwich generation and having these pressures on both sides creates that rich, nourishing, fertile ground for massive personal transformation for the person that's going through it.
Yes. I just wish, it gets better over time. I just wish that as you're in the midst of what sometimes feels like this vice, that we could fully appreciate it for its own sake and every moment within it. I think sometimes, maybe it's resistance. I don't even know what it is. I think the time that I do it gets shorter and shorter though each time. When we were caregivers for my husband, I was a different person than when, I was a caregiver for my mom. And I mean, they're two different relationships to release, but a lot of the process is the same. And I did it so differently. And I still had some things like, oh gosh, I wish I had, but now I've kind of grown through that. So,
Yeah, I love the metaphor of like a spring. Like life brings you the same lessons time and time again, but you're just at a slightly different level.
And it's
So
nice when it's going up.
Yeah, it might feel like you're going in circles, but you're just like an inch higher than last time.
Right, right. And sometimes, oh, I went through this, so I'd be prepared for this.
Totally.
Yeah.
I've been thinking a lot about luck lately, actually, because one of my favorite definitions of luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And I think that's what we're talking about here, because you've been prepared and you're meeting that opportunity once again. So you're starting to address that opportunity from a slightly different perspective. And is that considered luck?
See, well, I guess for me, I see it as kind of like divine intention, with part of my purpose being to grow and expand, and so each time it comes around, it's to show me how much I have grown, and to then also give me the stimulate more growth, because I never get it like, it's never that, oh, I figured that out and it's perfect this time. It's never that, but it's so much more comfortable the second time or the third time. And maybe even there are a few things in life, I can't think of any right now, but maybe there are a few things that I feel like I got that. But mostly it's just so empowering to know, wow, I did this so differently last time. And so this opportunity is also a reflection of my own growth. So, yeah.
Would you consider that to be one of your main lessons over the years from these transitions?
Ooh, I got lessons from each of them. So, and really, sometimes, I don't know about you, but like sometimes I don't realize the lesson until I'm further down the road and I'm looking back at it and I'm going, I learned that there, or I got that there. So from the whole transitioning to college experience, I got, you don't have to continue doing something that you've always said you were going to do, or that you wanted to do, if you no longer want to. You don't have to. When conditions change, you get to change your mind. So I got that. And I think it was the beginning of trusting my instincts about what I was feeling and thinking and needing and wanting for myself. I didn't have all that language at the time. It was almost intuitive. It's almost like we move away from our intuition only to return to it later, because sometimes even going through coaching, I was going, I knew this already. It's kind of a remembering. That's been my experience. From caregiving, I learned that I'm stronger than I thought I was, because that was both times. They were really hard things, letting go. And I'm one of those people that I'm a fixer or a tinkerer. So like somehow I'm supposed to be able to fix things. And these were things that were beyond my ability to fix, though I did try. I learned things don't have to be perfect. That when you bring a boatload of love to it, it covers a lot of things. I got that from that. That's when self-care, first time around, I learned self-care is more than a massage and a mani-pedi, because I wasn't getting those, but there's so many other things that I could have done that I didn't come up to that's self-care. Like I didn't get that. And I also learned there to ask for help, which was something that I wasn't really good at. I'm the one that comes in to help. I wasn't one to really ask for help. So I think I learned that more powerfully in that season. From the transitions that people made as I'm transitioning, I think one of the most powerful things I learned was that you never know when there's not another tomorrow. So seize today. Say everything you want to say. Make the most of every day. One of the things that I shared with Nia that I got from the first round, as she was facing her dad, was, if today was the last day, would that really matter?
Mm.
And there were times when, I had to say it to myself. It wasn't as good the first time. Sometimes I would, because it's messy. These things are not always neat. But what I learned, I was able to share with her. And that was one of the most powerful ones. Does it really matter? Is it that important if today was the last day? And then kind of live every day as if it is. And from just my life, I think in general, because I also spent a lot of time volunteering in there when I needed some place to put my creativity, was that everything that we do, whether it's our work or whether it's a volunteer thing or it's our relationships, every time you're giving, you have an opportunity to grow. And I think every time I got to do something that I didn't already know how to do or I wasn't super good at, because I like being good at what I do, when I chose something that I was going to have to work a little harder at, or where there was a learning curve, those were the times that my life kind of just went boom. So yeah, probably like every day I could tell you, oh, well, I learned that today, but those are, I think, the biggest ones from the transition, though.
Yeah, I mean, I hear this a lot in this series, is the transition from external focuses as our motivating factors to internal focuses as our motivating factors, like especially when it comes to the intuition piece. And I'm also wondering at this point, like, is childhood, is growing for like the first 2 decades of our life part of being externally directed so that we can then shift to the internal later on? Like, is it wrong that we're externally directed early on, or is it just part of the process?
It's annoying when you're like the parents and the adults looking at it, because we what do? We say, oh, they're so selfish. And but I think you might have something there, because it is important. You're looking out, you're taking in your if there's nothing to go in for so early, really, it's, you're looking at things and you're making decisions. Well, what is that like? What do other people say it's like? How does that feel to me? Do I like that? Do I not like that? It's sort of that early sifting and sorting through life and determining what feels good, what doesn't feel good. And then I think you got to recover from the definitions that might have been assigned to things as you were going along. But yeah, it's a time to experience. And when we're experiencing, as I'm thinking about it, it's out there, it is out there.
Yeah, just one of the questions that I'll chew on for probably years, not decades.
That, and what's it all about, Alfie? It's just so much. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, let's wrap it up with some practicality. So what are the tools and practices that you use to support yourself during these times?
Breathing, because I find that, I don't know, I don't know how it is for other people, but for me, like, I'll catch myself not breathing. Like the tension, like you're really not breathing, and it's like, oh, okay, let's breathe. So intentional breathing. I wish I had a really, really consistent meditation practice. I do not, but I do meditate. And I'll go on jags where I'm really regular, and then times when I'm not, and I'm more mindful. So I'm moving and I'm taking in, and it's a meditative experience. And maybe that's where meditation ultimately goes. I'm not sure, because I didn't have that rigid practice first, but I do appreciate and enjoy it and really feel better when I have visualization and affirmations to kind of ground myself in what I know to be true versus what might be happening around me. Oh gosh, a bath. I love a bath. I don't get them often enough, but so for when I do, it really does feel like a nurturing of self. Um, Reading, feeding my mind, like for me, just anything that's going to grow me feels like caring for me. So that's a part of my self-care, which I never would have said the first time around. I really did think it was when I had services done, and I would include the bath, things like that, but so many things, a conversation with a friend that warms my heart, and that is really easy, and that I just enjoy who I am when I'm with them, things like that. Listening to other people's stories, because I find them to be super, super inspiring. And there's always something, no matter what it is, no matter whose story it is, there's always that one, at least one thing that I can take away and say, oh, I'm going to put that in my little bag for my journey. So yeah, those are the big ones for me.
I mean, those are big ones. I love those. Like meditation is a huge one of mine. Obviously reading is a huge one of mine. I think I read 112 books last year. So obviously that's a huge self-care practice for me.
Oh my gosh, what would we do without books? What would we do? I love always. I used to be in the bath when I was growing up. I'd be in the tub with a book, and I wouldn't want to get out until I finished the book. I'd come out looking like a raisin.
Yeah, you're a true bookworm if you've dropped your book in the bath
and screamed. No. So yeah, I love that one. What else do you do?
Oh, I mean, I do a whole host of things. Daydreaming is actually a big portion of self-care for me. I do daydreaming every morning. It's part of my morning routine. And it helps me come up with ideas. Like whenever I'm chewing on something, whether it's business related or writing related or family related, friends related, it's where I let my mind play around with ideas. And so new solutions come up when I'm having that time. So then I can start the day with like a solidified to-do list rather than sitting down at my desk at 9 a.m. and being like, all right, what's going on? Where am I? Who am I? What does my calendar look like? It's more like, okay, so these are the priorities that are on my plate right now. And these are the ideas that I have for them. So let's just get to it.
So wait, so you do your schedule like on the day?
No, it's not my schedule. It's more of like the things that are on the burners of my brain.
Okay.
Like whether I have a big project going on, whether I have a fight with my friends or family going on at the moment, or whether I'm trying to figure out what to do with my car or apartment or whatever's on my mind at the moment. It gives me time to just kind of like sit with those burners instead of putting them on autopilot.
I never would have called it daydreaming. It has such a negative connotation. Not that, not all daydreaming, but like, it's kind of like you're not focusing. You're not this. I wouldn't have called it daydreaming. So now I'm going to give myself permission to daydream. I call it like when I'm quiet enough that the voices that are within can actually be heard. But I love the daydreaming title. So I'm going to borrow it.
I'm a bit of a neuroscience nerd, and so there is neuroscience to back up the importance of daydreaming. It actually creates a space in the brain called diffuse cognitive processing. And so it allows you to tap into all of the different parts of your brain at the same time, because usually when you're thinking, you're using one part. You're like thinking about math, you're thinking about language, you're thinking about scheduling, and so you have that one part of the brain is going to be more lit up than the other parts when you're usually thinking about something. But when you're daydreaming, everything lights up because you're letting it wander. You're letting it just frolic through the pastures of your brain.
Fertile ground.
So you have the ability to connect parts that weren't connected before. And so that's where the process of insight comes from. Like when you get eureka ideas, when you get, like, I get a lot of ideas when I'm driving, when I'm in the shower, when I'm falling asleep, because that's the state of the brain that is most diffused.
Well, I will be daydreaming intentionally every morning. Thank you for that.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of my soapboxes. Especially for creatives.
you know, and I say intentionally because it happens anyway, but I think there's something about intentionality that gives something wings.
Yeah. And giving it the space and time. Like, it's when I'm drinking my morning coffee. Like every morning I sit down for 15 or 20 minutes with my coffee. And I even have like a daydreaming chair in this room. And I sit in that chair and drink my coffee and look out the window and just daydream.
I see my new morning habit.
Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah,
I like
that's
that.
my favorite one. All right. Well, anything you want to add before we wrap up today?
Except that I'll say my major lesson, and I hope it is true or becomes true for everybody that might be listening to this, is that I am a resilient and capable creator. I think that's the biggest aha moment for me throughout the whole transition thing. So let it happen. Let it happen.
I love that. I'm going to write that on my affirmation list.
Well, I'll be daydreaming. So
there we go. It's a give and take on these podcasts. All right. Well, these are powerful things that we're talking about today. And audience, we definitely encourage you to share your own insights and stories and feelings and lessons with us as well. We'd love to know how transitions have shaped you in your own lives and businesses. So special thanks to Deb for joining me today. It's been an absolute
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So please comment, like, subscribe, check out Linktree/ClaireJoins for all of my links. And then where can folks find out more about you, Deb?
They can tune into the podcast. We put out new episodes every Wednesday. It's on all the major podcast channels. Real Talk with Deb and Nia, that's Nia. And that's, or you can, our website is realtalkwithdebandnia.com. So it's not really hard. They're both the same. Awesome. And you can follow us on socials that are at Real Talk DN.
Okay, awesome. And I'll put those links in the comments and on the YouTube description for easy access.
Thank you.
And then until next time, please remember that your authentic self is extraordinary. It is wonderful. And you owe it to yourself to create the elevated life that you know you are capable of. Take care, everyone.
Bye.